He was born into royalty, but history had other plans. Prince Philip entered the world in 1921 as a prince of Greece and Denmark, at a time when Europe was tearing itself apart. Kingdoms were falling, revolutions were spreading, and royal blood no longer guaranteed safety. Before he could speak, Philip lost his country. Greece collapsed into political chaos, and his family became targets overnight. His father was arrested, the monarchy was overthrown, and escape was the only option left. What followed sounds almost unreal. The infant prince was carried onto a British ship, hidden inside a wooden crate once used to transport oranges. That box was his cradle, his lifeboat, and his final connection to his homeland. This is where his story truly begins. Not in a palace, but as a refugee, fleeing everything he was born to be from the very start. Philip's escape saved his life, but it cost him something just as important: stability. The royal family fled across Europe, moving from country to country with no permanent home. Titles followed them, but security did not. His mother, Princess Alice, suffered severe mental illness and was eventually committed to a psychiatric hospital. His father drifted away, settling in the south of France and living a life far removed from his children. By the time Philip was a young boy, his family was no longer a family at all. He was sent to live with relatives, then to schools in different countries, constantly uprooted. Greece was gone. His parents were absent. Even his language changed depending on where he was sent next. Philip grew up learning one lesson early and painfully: survival meant adaptation. Identity was flexible. Belonging was temporary. And from this fractured childhood, a hardened independence began to form. As Philip grew older, Europe grew darker. The continent that had pushed his family into exile was now sliding toward war. And once again, his past began to follow him. Philip's 4 sisters married German aristocrats. Over time, those marriages placed his family uncomfortably close to Nazi Germany. Some of his brothers-in-law joined the Nazi Party. Others wore German military uniforms. Their choices would later cast a long shadow over Philip's life. For a young man trying to rebuild himself, this was dangerous baggage. Britain, the country that had offered him refuge, was now at war with Germany. Public opinion was unforgiving, and association alone could destroy a future. Philip understood something crucial. His survival depended on distance. From his family, from his past, from everything that could tie him to the wrong side of history. This silent separation would define the man he was becoming. Cut off from his past, Philip turned toward the future. He found it at sea. The Royal Navy offered something he had never known before: structure, discipline, and a clear sense of purpose. It did not care about his broken family or dangerous connections. It only cared about performance. Philip enrolled as a naval cadet and quickly stood out. He was sharp, demanding of himself, and relentless in his standards. The chaos of his childhood had forged resilience. The Navy gave it direction. For the first time, he belonged to something larger than himself, not because of his name, but because of his ability. Britain was no longer just a refuge. It was becoming home. This decision mattered more than it seemed. By choosing service over status, Philip began rewriting his identity. Not as a displaced prince, but as a British officer, loyal, capable, and determined to prove that his future would not be defined by where he came from. It was during his naval career that Philip's path quietly crossed with destiny. In 1939, while still a young officer, he met 13-year-old Princess Elizabeth. At the time, nothing about the meeting suggested history in the making. He was a penniless naval cadet with no country. She was a princess sheltered within the certainty of the British royal system. Yet something unexpected formed. Letters followed. Over the years, distance and war only strengthened the connection. While Philip served in the Navy during the Second World War, Elizabeth watched from afar, bound by duty and expectation. Their relationship grew in contrast to everything Philip had known. It was steady, orderly, and rooted in responsibility. But it came with conditions. To stand beside Elizabeth, Philip would have to give up almost everything that defined him. His foreign titles, his religion, even his surname. Love, in this case, was not escape. It was another test, one that demanded total surrender of the past. When the engagement was announced, Philip's past came under scrutiny. Every connection, every relative, every decision was examined. And what investigators found was deeply inconvenient. His sisters were living in Germany. Their husbands had worn Nazi uniforms. Some had openly supported the regime Britain had just fought a brutal war against. For the British public, this was not ancient history. It was fresh, painful, and unacceptable. As a result, Philip's family was quietly erased from the occasion meant to celebrate his future. None of his sisters were invited to the wedding. No brothers-in-law. No visible trace of the family he had been born into. The message was clear. To become part of the British monarchy, Philip could not bring his past with him. The wedding would move forward, but he would stand alone, surrounded by strangers, leaving behind the last remaining pieces of his former life. In the months before the wedding, Philip completed his transformation. He renounced his Greek and Danish royal titles and became a British subject. He adopted a new surname, Mountbatten, and formally joined the Church of England. Step by step, he dismantled the identity he had been born with. These changes were not symbolic. They were permanent. Philip understood that there would be no return, no dual identity, no space for nostalgia. The monarchy demanded absolute loyalty, and he accepted the terms. In 1947, he married Princess Elizabeth at Westminster Abbey. The ceremony was grand, but the sacrifice behind it was invisible. Philip was no longer a foreign prince seeking acceptance. He was a man who had chosen duty over origin. Yet even as he stood beside Elizabeth, his future was uncertain. He was marrying into power, but surrendering his own place within it. Marriage did not bring Philip authority. It brought restraint. When Elizabeth became queen in 1952, his naval career ended overnight. He was ordered to step back, to walk behind, to exist beside power rather than wield it. For a man shaped by discipline and command, this was a quiet loss. Philip was expected to support, not lead, to speak carefully, to stand still while history moved through his wife. Behind palace walls, frustration grew. He had opinions, energy, ambition, but the role allowed little space for any of it. The crown belonged to Elizabeth, and everything around it had to orbit her. Yet Philip adapted once again. He turned constraint into function, carving meaning from limitation. Over time, he became the monarchy's anchor, steady, demanding, and relentlessly present. He would never be king, but he would shape the institution in ways few ever noticed. Prince Philip lived the rest of his life in a role history had never prepared him for. He became the longest-serving royal consort in British history, standing beside the same woman for more than 70 years. Not as a ruler, but as a constant. He never returned to Greece as a prince. He never reclaimed the titles he surrendered. The boy who fled his country in a crate never truly stopped running. He simply chose where to stand. Philip's story is not about power gained. It is about identity abandoned and rebuilt. About a man who learned early that survival meant sacrifice, and belonging came at a cost. In the end, the refugee did become Britain's prince, not by birthright, conquest, or ambition, but by loyalty, endurance, and a lifetime of standing one step behind the crown. And that choice defined him forever.